Paul must have been skinnier back then. Okay, this is not where Paul was. Here it is, the place he arrived. The history of the town begins in the 7th century BC in the reign of Philip II, father of Alexander the Great. Flourished here the seaport of Neapolis or Kavala, which served the city of Philippi. In 49 AD, St. Paul disembarked in the port and began preaching for the first time Christianity in Europe. The port became an important trading post for European trade. In 1913, with the Balkan Wars, Ottoman rule came to an end. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, this is Kavala, where he landed. See, and then, okay, so he got off the boat, yeah, on this nice ramp. Just kidding. And then he walked, and he walked, and he walked. Paul did a lot of walking, man. He must have been fit, boy, I tell you what. And then he went down this street for sure, 100% without a doubt. He goes to this building, right there. He waits for the light, because obviously Paul is not a jaywalker. He comes to this building, which did not yet exist, because the building exists because he was here. And here is a bunch of things. And there's Paul. What? There's Paul getting off the boat right there. Oh my goodness. It's real. He was in Troas, which is in modern day Turkey, and he got a dream about the man in Macedonia. He stopped at Samothrace, which is an island, and then he came here to Kavala. It was called Neapoli at the time. It's all in Acts 16. He took the street to, it's called the Ignatius something. He walked that to Philippi. So I believe that's about a 30-mile walk, so we're not going to do it, but I'll see you by that road. So something I never thought I'd see, a no smoking sign in Greece. Okay, so this is the Via Ignatia, named after Gaius Ignatia, who was a Roman proconsul. It spans from modern day Turkey to, I believe, Albania. It was built between 200 and 150 BC. It's 690-ish miles. I don't know how. Weren't you supposed to be able to like drive carts on trading routes? Because I don't know how you're supposed to drive a cart on this thing, bro. Like, I can barely walk on it. But anyway, Texas is 770 miles thick. So it wouldn't actually cover the span of Texas, but it takes about 12 hours to drive across Texas. So it would take about 12 hours to drive if you could drive it, because ain't nobody driving these roads. And this is the road that Paul took to get everywhere that he went in Greece. Starting in Kavala, of course. Then it was called Neapolis. Then going to Philippi. I believe that's about a 10-mile walk. Kavala was really just an entry point that was important for Philippi, and Philippi was the main city. He came here in the year 49 in the winter. He was traveling with Silas and Timothy and Luke, and it took him 2 days apparently to get through Kavala and get to Philippi. Would it take me 2 days to walk 10 miles? If I walk 1 mile in 30 minutes, that's 300 minutes, which is it's about 4 hours. Man, he must have been talking up a storm, I tell you what. Oh, this road is kind of hard to walk on. I'm probably walking very slowly, to be fair. But then the next time he came, I think like 7 years later, it took him 5 days to get from Kavala to Philippi. So homeboy was getting old, I guess. Paul was converted around 34 AD. Then he spent some time in Arabia and he did some things, and then his first missionary journey was to Damascus, modern day Syria, and different areas in Turkey. And that was around 47 AD. In 49 was the Council of Jerusalem, which is when all of the disciples and apostles got together and they were trying to decide what to do with the Gentiles. In that same year, 49 AD, in the winter of 49 AD, Paul went on his second missionary journey, again after seeing the man in Macedonia in a vision. I believe he wrote Galatians while he was in Damascus. He's gonna write 1st and 2nd Thessalonians while he's in Corinth, actually. And then some other books. So they were just chilling on this road. Just walking. Paul and Silas and maybe Timothy and Luke. Maybe some other dudes. Just, walking these roads with your buddies in the forest. I wonder if they thought that the ocean and the mountains were beautiful and if they enjoyed the walk or if they were just so used to it. Ooh, this tree is a mastica tree. It gives off a resin, which is actually really good for your teeth. I figured out the secret to making this go faster. You have to walk on the edge, because that's where they put the big rocks. They put look at that one. That's a whopper. Boy, that's a good one. I wonder what it was like picking out the rocks, if they were like, oh, this is a good one, and they got excited about the bigger ones. And then Paul stopped at a cafe. It has fountains all over the place and a river that runs all the way through. It is the river that is upstream from where Paul found Lydia and preached to her. We are upstream of the Zinginthos River. We're a bit ahead of Paul, and we're gonna have to go find him. And this is St. Lydia's baptistry, where she was baptized, and Hotel Lydia. Boy, they really are making a hot buck off of Lydia over here. Okay. Alright. I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. So, we'll see how long I last. Paul and Luke was with them because Luke said we got off the boat and we blah 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 in Acts 16. Timothy was with them. Also, I forgot Timothy was half Greek. The beginning of chapter 16 talks about how Paul decided to bring Timothy with him, even though it was controversial because his father was a Greek. They got here, and before he even preached in the Roman Agora, because Philippi was a Roman colony, there were actually not a lot of Jews here, so there wasn't a synagogue yet. Because typically, I believe when Paul would go somewhere, he would preach in the synagogue first, and then he would start preaching everywhere else. But here there was no synagogue, so on the Sabbath they were headed to the place of prayer, which I looked it up and it said it was probably just a informal gathering of Jews by the riverside. We're about a 20-minute walk away from the Roman Agora, which is the city center, the place where the marketplace was, the place near where the prison is, the place where the girl with the demon would have been shouting after Paul, the place where probably he would have preached to larger crowds. We're just off by some riverside. And this is where Paul and his crew went on the Sabbath. They came and they found some women and they preached to Lydia, and Lydia was the first person in Europe to get saved. And then she let them stay at her house and all that sort of thing. Lydia wasn't actually Greek. She was from somewhere in modern-day Turkey. What's up, Lydia? Somebody gave her wipes and a chocolate bar. It's interesting. Maybe they were just like, you know, with their feet in the river, washing their clothes. Okay, so it says, and on the Sabbath day we went outside the gate to the riverside. So this river is west of the western wall of the city of Philippi. And they went out to the riverside. It says, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention, and then she was baptized. I don't know, it doesn't really seem deep enough to be baptized. Yeah, you could baptize right there. It's deep enough. I bet you she was baptized right here. Maybe not, I don't know. But it's possible. I got kicked out after all. Okay, here we are. I believe this half arch thing, well, this for sure, is part of the city wall of Philippi. And, ooh, I wonder what this is. Looks like a toilet. So this was all built in, it was 356 BC by Philip the Great and his son Alexander. Then the Romans took over. They still put on productions here. It's very uncomfortable to sit in these theaters. Oh my goodness, is it uncomfortable. It's the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done in my life. I think some things were meant to stay in the past. And the Romans took over in 42 BC. So, not all of this is from Philip the Great. Some of it was built by the Romans. And not all of it was there when Paul was alive. But the theater was there. The walls were there. The marketplace, or the Roman Forum, was there. You know, I always wondered how the guys who do those, like, informational Bible things get the space for filming. And I used to think that they rented out the place, because I'm like, there's too much tourism, obviously they have to rent it out. But this place is dead, boy. I am the only one here, so that explains things for sure. This is the sanctuary to Artemis, and then after it is sanctuary to Sylvanus. And then a little bit further on is a sanctuary to an Egyptian god. But then in the 500s after Christ, several basilicas were built in this area, which are like churches. So this used to be a church. Very interesting. I never knew that they just dug this stuff up from the ground and then put it where they think it was. That's very disappointing to me. And I'm like, you mean this wasn't just standing like this the whole time? Alright, this is the Roman Forum, which would be the place where they took Paul and Silas after they cast the demon out of the girl, and beat them. And the prison of St. Paul. Maybe he sat here and waited. Here it is. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Wow, this is not how I imagined it in the book. I imagined it to be like a deep tunnel. It's like 20 feet wide. I mean, I at least imagined there to be several cells. But I'm just saying, like, the prison guard, he was about to kill himself. And then they had to like come out of their cells and be like, hey dude, we're still here. If the cell was that small, the prison guard would have known that they were still there. So I'm just saying. I figured out the jail thing. Paul and Silas were in the inner cells and they were singing and everyone was listening to them. And then the earthquake happened and actually broke their shackles and opened the doors. The guard was sleeping, and then when he woke up and he saw that the doors were open, he assumed that they had all escaped. And then Paul and Silas cried out to him and were like, no, we're here. So obviously they were in the dark, and it says that the jailer then called for light, and he saw that everyone was still there. They saw the jailer because he was outside of the prison. You could probably see him in the moonlight, but he didn't know that they didn't escape because he had fallen asleep. So it all makes sense now. I am satisfied. This seems kind of eerie. It's just ruins. There's Paul's prison. The Acropolis was on the top of the hill, and then this is like the marketplace. Pretty sure there's some baths and whatnot on the corners. I know I'm like seeing it, and it's like really cool that I'm seeing it, but I feel like it's so different that I just don't really know what it was really like. I think I found a toilet. Gross. Hopefully it would be downwind. It's just weird that they all had to go to the bathroom together. I mean, privacy. Let me just go to the library real quick. Wow. Look at all those books. Just kidding. Okay, thank you. This is where they took Paul and Silas to judge them. This was an administrative place, and there was a lot of like monuments and arches and all of that sort of stuff, and temples and religious things and judgy things. Paul probably walked on something 2,000 years ago in 49, and then again in 56. Ancient relic of the past. I think that it's like eerie because this used to be like a city center, like it was bustling, it had things going on. There were a lot of people here, and now it's just years later and it's like dead. And it almost feels like in apocalyptic movies when you see like New York City all overgrown. That's how I feel right now. I'm also reminded of like Chronicles of Narnia, the first book. They found Jadis in like a kingdom where everything was dead and the moon was red and there were no people, and then they found these statues like right there. Maybe that's Jadis, but somebody decapitated her and cut off her arm. Now we're going to Amphipolis. Amphipolis is about a 45-minute drive, but it's 30 miles, so I'm guessing that it took Paul like all of a week or something to get there. But he just stayed there for a night and then passed through. It's like all farmland out here, and it's really beautiful. And I'm just wondering if it was like this when Paul was here. A lot of dead sunflowers, unfortunately. You know what I just realized? Jesus was homeless. So, I just found a horse jaw. Oh my gosh, where am I? Okay, well, I was gonna try to take, get on top of that tower, but then the dogs looked scary, so. Are you a nice doggy? Stay away from me. Look at that. Yeah, no. This is Amphipolis. It's a very small town. There's a statue of Alexander the Great. Paul just spent a little bit of time here. Very hilly. Paul must have had some good ankles, man. Tell you what. Where are they taking me? I don't know what that is, but it looks old. Well, I honestly don't know what's going on with this tower, but the river is nice. It's the river Stuma. And then it showed you how they reconstruct these things. Like all of the brighter stone, obviously, they fixed in the brick, and then this older stone is the original. Y'all probably knew that, but I just found that out recently. Next stop, Apollonia. And it's probably gonna be dark. Okay, this is Apollonia. Nothing too important about this one. Don't blame Paul for just passing through. Ding, ding, ding. There's a lot of scary noises. Apollonia. Come during the daytime. Here's a monument for Paul. That's all. That's all I got. And a special tree. Look at that beauty. Can't even capture it all in the frame. I would climb it, but this place is too creepy. Okay, we're here at the Roman Forum in Thessaloniki. It's like deeper into the ground, so it goes down. That shows like how much the city has built up on the land. When you're in Athens, they'll have these see-through things that you can sit on, and when you look down you realize that it's like ancient ruins. The city floor is 10 to 20 feet built on top of that. But this is the forum, so this is the marketplace. This is where Jason would have been interrogated. Jason was the guy who converted and was keeping Paul in his house. And then they interrogated him and tried to find out where Paul was, but Jason wouldn't tell them. I found the toilet. They would just sit in a circle together there. Paul probably entered here when he came from Philippi. This is the gate. Paul walked 100 miles from Philippi to Thessaloniki through those two cities that start with an A. And then he came here and he first preached at the Jewish synagogue because there was a significant Jewish population in Thessaloniki, and so he followed his traditional custom of preaching there first. Okay, right now I'm in Aristotle Square. I was thinking about it and I was like, dang, Paul was really like low key. Here's Aristotle. I feel like I thought of his missionary journeys as like this great, you know, coming of Paul to preach the gospel. But really, he's only getting a few people each time, and there is so much opposition going on. They begged him to leave Philippi because they beat him and then found out he was a Roman citizen. They chased him out of Thessaloniki, and then he went to Berea. And the people from Thessaloniki followed him and chased him out of Berea. He must have been making an impact if they were that upset about it. But you hear about Lydia and Justin, and it seems like these were kind of simple people. And just like very small numbers starting out these first churches, which is kind of crazy because then you look at these places now and there's church upon church upon church upon church of veneration towards Paul, all dedicated to Christianity. So very interesting stuff. Here is the ocean. The Thermaic Gulf, which is part of the Aegean Sea. You can't see that good, but this is very important. It's called the White Tower. It's a landmark in Thessaloniki. And yeah. Okay. According to MacedoniaHeritage.gr, the oldest Jewish synagogue in Thessaloniki, and probably the one that Paul preached on, was at the corner of these two streets right here. Now I think it's a bookstore. So Paul was at the ocean and then he walked down the street and he preached right here. It was called the Es Ahaim synagogue, which means tree of life. Anyways, this is a very important landmark, perhaps the most important landmark in Thessaloniki. It's called the White Castle. Ottoman Empire, that sort of stuff. So there were settlements in Thessaloniki forever, for all of human history and civilization. Obviously it's a really good port city. It was named after the wife of the man who built it, Cassander, in 315 BC. The Macedonians under King Philip conquered it, and under Alexander the Great. Right here. What's up, dude? Alexander. Yes. And the wife of Cassander was actually Alexander's sister. Also an interesting fact, Xerxes, who is supposed to be Ahasuerus in the book of Esther, the king that she ended up marrying, used Thessaloniki as a naval base in 480 BC. This is Monastery Vladodon. It is built where Jason's house was. So it was founded by two brothers, the Vlatai brothers, hence the name Vladodon. And this is also where Paul would have preached, in Jason's house. And it's quite far from the city. The Jewish synagogue is about here. The agora's gotta be somewhere around here. I think it would actually take me about 40 minutes to walk where we are right now. They also have peacocks. So Paul also would have escaped from here, from Jason's home. These walls are actually the walls of the Acropolis. So every Roman city had a Roman Forum, had an Acropolis. This is where Paul escaped from. I should say this is probably where Paul escaped from, because I guess at the end of the day we don't really know. It was somewhere around here. He was here, man. The place that they dedicated to Paul in 1913, purportedly a spring where Paul quenched his thirst after running away from Jason's house. Alright, I'm in Berea. You can hear the river next to me. So Paul came here to Berea after leaving Thessalonica. It was 73 kilometers. People in Thessalonica that didn't like him followed him and eventually kicked him out of here too, which is kind of crazy. But when Paul got here, he started preaching to the Jews in the Jewish synagogue, and they tested what he said in the scriptures. Pretty cool people in Berea. In fact, he made a friend that eventually came with him to Athens. He left Silas and Timothy here, and he went on to Athens by boat. Okay, these are the Jewish quarters. They're not Jewish anymore because in 1943, Hitler came and brought all of them to Auschwitz. But there was a large Jewish communities in Greece, actually. During the Ottoman Empire, they all kind of coexisted. They were allowed to keep their religions. Yeah, so this might have been the synagogue where Paul preached. And it also says the last sermon that was preached here was on May 1st when they were taken by the Nazis. So then Paul went to Athens. He took a boat from Thessalonica and he went all the way around the southern tip of Greece to the west side of Athens, and he landed in a port that is now modern day Paleo Faliro. And he walked himself over to Athens and he preached again in the Jewish synagogue and in the Roman Agora, which you see right here, which by the way is right next to the headquarters of the European Public Law Organization, for which I was interning this summer. And from the Roman Agora, you can look up and see the Acropolis. Another place where you can see the Acropolis from, and somewhere that we went late one night that has a beautiful overlook of the city lights, is Mars Hill, or the Areopagus. And this is where Paul reasoned with the philosophers in Athens and talked about the statue to the unknown God. As he was walking around Athens, he was seeing all of these statues to gods, and it was quite concerning to him, and so he decided that he was going to preach about the one true God. And here in Athens, of course, were the philosophers of the day, the Epicureans and the Stoics, and all kinds of philosophers, and they were ready to hear what Paul had to say. From Athens, Paul went on to Corinth. This is the Corinth Gulf. And what I love about Corinth is that when Paul got there, he began preaching the gospel, and people believed and were baptized. And God said to him in a vision, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking, and do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in the city who are my people." And that's such a beautiful ending to Paul's missionary journey, because everywhere that he went before now, people were chasing him out and ready for him to leave, or were a bit difficult to talk to. But when he goes to Corinth, it's almost like he finds refuge and he finds people ready to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. And so he actually ends up staying in Corinth for a year and 6 months. So that brings us to the end of Paul's second missionary journey in Greece. Thank you so much for watching.